Senator Talina Cruz introduced legislation that will provide $30 million from the general fund for the purpose of increased pay schedule for school teachers and school administrators that fall within the educator pay plan. The finalization of the teacher pay study and approval of salary adjustment recommendations were only released yesterday, and because of this, the necessary amounts were not yet included in GDOE's budget request, said Senator Nelson. We would like to ensure that our educators are rightfully provided the pay increases that they deserve for all that they do for our island's students, said Senator Nelson. So there you go. But we'll probably get more details maybe from the senator herself next week. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and just get a reaction from the minority here in the form of Senator Frank Blas Jr. Good morning, Senator. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Chris, and good morning, Guam.
Happy
nice
Friday.
to be with you this morning. Hey,
right on.
Thanks for the empanada in the waiting room.
You got it. Good. Thank you, sir. I mean, you look kind of hungry, so I figured I'd. So, Senator.
Yeah.
I guess just your reaction. The third, I mean, so we had the nurses' pay raise, the law enforcement pay raise, and now the teachers are getting their raise. And there was kind of a hint, I thought, at the end of the governor's press release about this, that all the GDOE staff who didn't get one would see an increase with the completion of the general pay plan study. So I felt like they kind of left that open for interpretation relative to like, hey, maybe later we can get everyone else their little bump too.
And that seems to be the trend that where they're going. However, I think that it would have been appreciated had there been a conversation with those in charge of the purse strings of the government, that being the legislature. To be found, to hear through press release that you're going to increase the needs, the revenues of the government of the government of Guam. You're going to the needs of for that revenue by $18 million this year and $30 million or $10 million this year and possibly $30 million next year, to include $18 million for law enforcement pay and another, I forgot the amount was for the nurses' pay, and then to make more promises. One has to wonder, okay, where is the plan to be able to ensure that, past this fiscal year, that can be sustained? If you can recall, the first off, the governor has informally presented the budget plan by means of the State of the Island address. What is the state of the island, and what should we expect, or what can we expect, over the next year? To find this out through press releases, and discussions that they made amongst themselves, not with us. And then to say that, okay, this is what it's going to cost. It's now your responsibility. It's the onus is on you, and then, if that's not political play, then I don't know what is. Nothing's to say that, people would appreciate pay raises. However, are those pay raises, can those pay raises be sustained? Can we afford them at this time, recognizing that there's still businesses that are that the government relies on for its revenue in as far as tax base? They're still closed. You still have thousands of people that are still out of work. I was just reading the newspaper. You've got families that are going to be evicted over the next few days because funding to assist them with their housing is I guess it's lack of better, it's running out, or it's no longer being accepted. So there are many other issues with respect to the revenues that are being generated and the revenues that are being spent by the government of Guam. Don't get me wrong, Chris. I'm not to say that these teachers and these firefighters, these police officers and these nurses, don't receive better pay. That's not the point here. The point is in getting that better pay, can the government of Guam, can those employers, which is here in this case the government of Guam, be able to pay that? Are we making promises that we're going to have to renege on, or that that are not going to be able to keep because the finances are not there? In this conversation, if they say that there is the money, well, provide, this plan to us so that we can see this. We haven't seen it. And, yesterday in watching the Department of Education's, budget hearing, it appeared to that, while it was welcome, it was still a surprise to even the higher echelon of GDOE. They're trying to scramble now to figure out, okay, how are they going to make this payment, over the next to close out the school year. So there are many questions that are still left unanswered, but you've got thousands of teachers who are ecstatic because they're going to be getting a pay raise. It's like, but the bosses are still trying to figure out how this is going to get done. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the case of other, employees within the government of Guam are saying, okay, what about us? One of the conversations that I had with my wife last night, she is a teacher, is concerned that from the teachers' aides, first off, it didn't cover all of GDOE, all the employees of GDOE. So now you've got employees in GDOE saying, what about us? Aren't we just as valuable? Aren't we just as important? Yeah. And I remember the conversations that were occurring after the law enforcement pay raises were provided. You had the teachers, and then you had other government, and you still have other government employees saying, what about us? In the meantime, Chris, we still got displaced employees, from within the private sector, the same sector that the government relies on for its revenues, and they're not working. I can get into other programs as far as, as an offshoot to all of this. If we feel that we're going to be able to provide the funding necessary for these raises. If you can recall, the LEAP program for the businesses, so they can continue to keep their doors open. My understanding is that there are businesses that have qualified for the program, have gotten their letters of approval, but have yet to be receive any of the funding so they can keep their businesses afloat. They still got the close signs on their businesses. Why? The government ran out of money. There wasn't enough money to be able to pay to provide the assistance that was promised to these businesses. And they're still waiting because and there's no more money. Yet we make an announcement now that we're going to be providing pay raises otherwise. What about those other places, those other entities that you made promises to? If you couldn't keep the promise through the LEAP program for the businesses, how can the teachers and the firefighters and the police officers and the nurses feel confident that in the next fiscal year or over the next year, they're going to continue to get the pay raises that the government says, oh, you're going to get it now? How?
Senator Talina Nelson introduced this $30 million to fund these pay raises. Can we? God, I hate to ask, but can we afford this?
Again, Chris, I challenge anybody. Get in your car. Well, that's another thing. Getting in your car because of the prices of gas and whatnot. Or take a walk down Tumon. Okay. Along with granted that there's a trickle of activity that's going on there. What was really embarrassing is I went through there over the weekend and I saw tourists that were doing this in the windows of shops that were closed. What we're asking them to come here, but what are we offering to them? And we can't offer it to them because the business is still closed. Business is still closed because although they've made the application and they were promised to be able to receive some funding to assist them, there's no funding. So you promise the businesses one thing, now you promise government employees, these employees another. But we're not paying it. And we're not paying it because where's the money? Where's the revenue generating activity that should go along with being able to, so that we can collect that revenue, we can collect those taxes so that we can make good on these promises? That hasn't happened. I fear that over the next, while we're making all of these promises, and I don't know who else is going to promise pay raises and stuff. But the problem is, one of the things that maybe the employees need to ask is, okay, where are we getting this money? If we've been asking, well, now maybe the recipients of these promises should ask those questions.
We did have a couple comments. Senator F. Glenn Lujan, who is a teacher, by the way, comments, and good point, Senator Blas. Will the pay raises be sustainable? That's my concern. Rosemary comments, unfortunately, this pay raise has caused another division. Yeah, and I kind of got to agree. I mean, it's great news, and I don't think anyone is arguing that, nurses, law enforcement, teachers, principals, administrators don't deserve a raise, right? No one's saying that. Obviously, they do. The pay, our pay compared to the same jobs people do in the States, I mean, it's different circumstances. There's a huge gap. So I understand that, we want to give the people the raises. But I think it's not only created division within the government of Guam, like, for example, with this teacher, the pay raises, you're going to create a situation where you're going to have a GDOE staffer who may be covering for a teacher who got a 20% raise but isn't at work, and you're going to get this. I mean, the GDOE staff guys, they are really the backbone of the public school system. They do everything. They're teachers, they're substitute teachers, they're janitors, they do everything. And for them to be just kind of overlooked, I mean, maybe it could have been something like, and I'm not trying to nitpick here, but it could have been something like 20 for teachers, maybe 10 for principals, 10 for administrators, and a 5 or a 10 for, the rest of the staff. Because when we had the board member, Miss Maria Gutierrez, on, that was kind of what she was saying with GDOE's study, was that they wanted to include, and make it department-wide. But, obviously that's not going to happen. And then there's the division in the government of Guam, Senator. But then what about the private sector? We work in the private sector, and let me just tell you guys for a fact, no one is getting a 20% raise, a 15% raise, a 10. No one is getting these kind of raises in the private sector. And so you have this division where we are struggling making the same amount of pay that we made before the pandemic, many times even, way before that. In the private sector, I mean, you just don't get raises as frequently or in the same amount that they are freely handing them out in the government of Guam. So you do have this division where we're looking over at Gov Guam saying must be nice, right? But then also, because of the sustainability and how much the price tag is, we're also wondering out here, those of us who aren't in the government of Guam, how is this going to impact the very precarious situation we're going to be in moving forward out of this pandemic? So it's a
I'm one of those business owners. I have, as a business owner, and for full disclosure, I have a insurance brokerage firm. I run one. I haven't received a paycheck from that, from that firm, since early of 2020. Okay. And that was so that I can keep my business alive, so that we continue to help our clients. In some cases, there are times I would have to pull up my own checkbook to make sure that we make payroll, for the business, so that we can keep it sustainable. But you're right, businesses, the private sector out there, which has suffered, which is the backbone of government entity, being able to provide the revenues necessary for the government to run, the backs are broken. And now you're saying that they're going to have to continue. You're going to have this extra burden on them, so that we can provide these pay raises. No, but again, I'm not saying that the people don't deserve raises in pay. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when we do make these promises for these pay raises, okay, or do we say that we're going to give these pay raises? Does that come along with a guarantee and the promise that it's going to be sustainable throughout over the next year or so? Because I don't see it, and I'm really concerned. And then who's that going to fall on? On the backs of who? You gonna blame it on the legislature again? The legislature had no idea, no contribution, no participation in any of this of the decisions necessary, that have now caused an increase and a need to increase the revenues. I mean, what what the government needs to operate. But now, from where? Where are we getting it from? Okay, you may have them say, well, there was an increase in military construction activity, but that's not going to be sustainable. That is the increase is because of the buildup that after the buildup and everything. Then what? Then what? After all these the cost to build these buildings, of which I venture to say that of many of these awards that went out, especially if they went out to off-island companies. Not to say that they didn't deserve it, but if you really think about it, how much of that revenue, how much of that award actually stayed on Guam? I venture to say, we're good if it's 30%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Senator,
So
can we? I'm sorry. Can we pivot? I know I think we've talked about to Bill 291, heartbeat bill. Is that getting reported out of committee? Do you have any idea?
We're still in discussions. I think that we're a long way off. I'm sure that the committee, because I am continuing to get I guess statements, if you will, testimonies. I don't see how that a bill that had that much in as far as public hearing, it can be ready for it to be put on the floor in this quick a time, because there's still that we still need the opportunity, first off, as the committee members itself, to be able to deliberate, discuss the bill in committee, then draft it. I mean, put the product, get the product ready, the bill ready for presentation, but then also for the primary sponsors and for the and the co-sponsors like me to be able to to go through this and see it. And I don't know if there's going to be any amendments to coming out of the committee, and if with those amendments, does it continue to remain germane to the bill? What does it do to the bill? That still hasn't been done. So I don't think that as for lack of a better term, controversial as it is, I don't think that we should just rush it out there. Just for the sake of being able to rush it out and get it voted on. No, there's still some discussion that needs to happen, not just within the committee, but also between the committee and the sponsors before we are comfortable that it's ready to be able to be put on the floor for deliberation by the body.
Would you consider withdrawing the bill? Because the term, we got like 8 months left, and then everyone's going to be in election mode. And you're right. I mean, there was 800 some testimonies submitted. Well,
you see, there may have been 800 some testimonies in opposition, but there are over 50 different churches and organizations who represent, who have representations within their bodies, of anywhere from 30 up to 1,000 people. So how do we count that too as well? Okay, so there's actually a misrepresentation in as far as the individual testimonies and testimonies by the organizations and how many people those organizations represent. Okay, so that said, is it goes back to whether this bill, okay, whether there were amendments that were going to be necessary, and what were those amendments, and then is it still in line with the intent of the bill? Okay, there are many things that can happen behind closed doors that we want to make sure that those T's are crossed and those I's are dotted. Before it goes on to the floor. Nothing's to say that after all of this that it's going to get that we're going to get the votes necessary to pass it, or that there may not be enough votes. Okay, but that said, it's still making sure that there is a bill that represents the intent and what the intent was of the primary sponsors and the co-sponsors to this, to make sure that when we get to the floor, this is a bill that we can defend. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know there's a few senators who are trying to get their bills out of committee, but you're saying keep this one in there for a little while and look it over?
Well,
Or?
no, no, no. Yeah, I mean, it's again, okay. You're right. There have been bills that have been in committee since the start of the term. Okay, and then there are bills. This is not just the first bill. The 291 is not the first bill. To be expedited, or the attempt to expedite it, if you will, has been there. Okay, this is a practice that in my previous terms in the previous legislatures, first off, there was cooperation, collegiality amongst members, so that we can discuss these bills and we can work together. For some odd reason, it's changed in this legislature in that, for the sake of what the sentiment is placed on social media and whatnot. We got to move fast on this bill. We got to move slow on this bill. No, let's move deliberate on the bill. Let's move deliberate on the bill.
Let me ask you this question, Senator. So this bill obviously is very controversial. I mean, you were taking some hits on this. I saw the memes. Would it be in the best interest of some senators to kind of like just leave this thing in committee so that no one has to take any more damage on it?
But then when do we discuss it?
Yeah.
Okay. First off, there's a whole discussion as to whether, first, our term's only 2 years long. Okay. And this term in the 36th Guam legislature ends in a few months. This is not one of those things where you can, put it on the side and then we come in the next legislature, come the 37th Guam legislature, we can bring it back up. No, it's got to go through the whole process again. Okay. So there has been the discussion about, when you're doing this for political expediency, you're doing this, because of this time and that time. When is the right time? When is the right time? Okay. It just so happens that the time that this bill is introduced, it's in a time where not just election season, in the midst of an election season, but in the midst of what the nation is still waiting to see what happens, within the Supreme Court. On their decision, that could greatly affect Roe versus Wade. So there's all of that discussion. So do we wait? I mean, if not this issue, what other issue is there going to be? I think that if you go back to almost any legislative term, okay, there were bills that were the discussion was, you introduce this bill early so that you're hoping that the people can forget before the election cycle comes around. Or you're introducing this bill because you want to influence the election cycle. No. You introduce the bill at the time when the primary sponsor feels that it's ready to be introduced, then you go from there. So I think there are many discussions and there are many things that, obviously that the people say, put it aside, and don't deal with it until after the election. When are we going to deal with this? In November, after everything's been set off? Then people are going to say, the reason why you're doing this is because it's lame duck. The people that voted for it don't have to worry about it because they already got elected. Or they haven't been elected, or they're not coming back. So, yeah, I guess that's my response to that inquiry.
Thank you, Senator. Have a good weekend. Okay.
All right, buddy. You take care of yourself,
okay.
right?
Yes. Okay. That's Senator Frank Plaza Jr., 736. Hey, we did have some comments here on the relative to the pay raises. F. Glenn Lujan comments in here. We were talking about GDOE staff, right? He comments, GDOE staff and support staff are hardworking and dedicated. They work just as hard, yet their positions are part-time or limited term. That's why we have such a high turnover rate, making a short-staffed eye a day. D. Wayne, here's an interesting comment, guys. The government should just give who deserves the raise, like the private sector. You receive raises. Wait a second. Hold on. What? You receive raises from being evaluated on your work. It seems fair. You have workers, for example, the mayor's office. Half those people in that office just stare at the phones and not answer, or are they just goofing around doing nothing? Come on now. And the mayor's got some hardworking staffers. But yeah, I mean, that is an idea, right? Why not give people raises based on the merits of whether or not they deserve it? But the issue we're dealing with here is a pay discrepancy when you compare what we're making here in these positions. Well, everybody, we're all making less than what our stateside counterparts make. I mean, government, private sector, right? But it's just the government apparently has ability to give out raises and restore or put